Australians got much richer during the pandemic. The mining industry releases a scathing and pretty disturbing report on practices in Western Australia. And not only do e-cigarettes not help people quit smoking, they can actually make things worse. It's Friday, the 24th of June, 2022. Welcome to Fear and Greed, Australia's most popular business podcast. I'm Michael Thompson, and good morning, Sean Aylmer.
Good morning, Michael. Looking forward to the weekend?
I am, actually. Are you?
I am. I'm supposed to be going. Well, I'm on holidays from tomorrow, so that'll be good fun.
Yeah, no, it'll be nice for you to get away. Look, I wonder, Sean, if I can just hijack this. I'd love to talk about our weekends and your holiday. I'm a little bit jealous of your holiday, but I'm going to hijack this for a second and just issue a bit of a call out, a general kind of call out to anyone listening to Fear and Greed right now to leave us a review, to give us a rating, preferably 5 stars, but to give us a review on Apple Podcasts or a star rating on Spotify. We've had 150 odd kind of 5-star ratings on Spotify and 300 or more on Apple Podcasts, and some fantastic reviews coming in. But why it's so important to us is because it helps to get Fear and Greed in front of more people. And so it's really kind of helping us to spread the word. So if you're enjoying the podcast, please just give us a 5-star rating and a few kind words in a review. Please make them kind. We're very sensitive people here, aren't we, Sean?
We're very sensitive. That's true.
All right. Now, all of that kind of housekeeping out of the way, let's get into the business of business. After the show, you've got an interesting chat today, and it is with Dr. Hugh Williams, who is a bit of a legend in the tech space. His latest role is the co-founder and chief executive of CS in Schools, but this is the bloke who basically headed up the team that invented Google Maps.
He was the first person to develop the concept of the infinite scroll, where you can just keep scrolling on a page and information keeps appearing. Really, really interesting guy. His passion at the moment is encouraging students, school students particularly, to get into technology. And he has a day of AI coming up, as in a day of artificial intelligence coming up, which he's trying to encourage schools to be part of. A really interesting chat.
Yeah, it's a great story. It's coming up a bit later, but the main story this morning, Sean, is a cracker. Australians are getting richer, it seems. Hey, that's a story I think that we all like to hear. And in fact, the wealth of Australians jumped by 1/3 during the pandemic. And the main reason? House prices.
Nothing builds wealth in Australia like owning a home. Yes, prices have come off a bit, but they're still much higher than pre-pandemic. National household wealth increased to just a touch below $15 trillion in the March quarter, which is a record figure. The Australian Bureau of Statistics found per capita income hit around $575,000, which was also a record. Now, since the March quarter 2020, household wealth is up about 35%. That's the 2 years of the pandemic. 35%. And that's mostly due to a 40% jump in house prices. The other big rise came in superannuation balances. They were up by about 22.5%. There are a few other big numbers in the report. There was record demand for credit of almost $219 billion during the quarter, mostly driven by businesses and then households and government. And the deposit assets of banks with the Reserve Bank of Australia reached an unprecedented level of almost $440 billion. That's money people have in savings accounts at the bank.
So presumably, on the whole, this is good news.
Well, yes, it's good that people are worth more, though that can and has led to inflation, so it's probably a bit mixed. There's also the chance that such a big jump in wealth, driven by one main factor, house ownership, widens the gap between the haves and the have-nots. But I'm sure overall most people think it's good to be wealthier. What I do find remarkable is just the sheer amount of money in the economy turning around. $15 trillion. Too much to even get your head around, I think.
That is a staggering number, isn't it? $15 trillion.
Incredible.
Amazing. All right. What happened on local markets yesterday, Sean?
The S&P ASX 200 closed up 0.3% to 6,528 points. Real estate, healthcare, consumer staples and tech companies led the way. The energy and material sectors didn't do so well. BHP was off more than 1%. Fortescue was 2% lower, while Woodside was down 2.4%. The banks were up slightly. ANZ led the way, up more than 1%. CSL jumped 2.2%. Transurban was up 2.6%. And property giant Goodman finished nearly 5% higher. Coles Group also did well. Many of the lithium stocks, though, were sold off. More on that later. And the gold stocks fell as the price of the precious metal dropped. In that sector, Ramelius Resources warned that production for this financial year will fall slightly short of expectations, sending its share price down 9%. Now, Michael, it's not in the top 200, but the share price of payroll and human capital management solutions business Pay Group jumped 155% yesterday after a $199 million bid by global compliance and payroll platform Deal, DEEL. 155%. That's quite a jump.
That is a massive jump. You were busting out all the great stats today. $15 trillion in the economy, 155%. I can't wait to see what you've got next for me.
It's a numbers day.
It sure is. What about global markets?
Oil prices have continued to fall. Now, the reason for that are growing concerns about an economic slowdown in the US, and that country is a massive consumer of oil. Brent crude is below $110 a barrel. The Aussie dollar's worth just under 69 US cents, and Bitcoin's trading around $20,500 a unit.
All right. We'll be back in a moment with the rest of the day's business news. Sean, an 11-month Western Australian inquiry into the mining industry has recommended that mining companies introduce background checks, an industry-wide register for sexual harassers, and limit alcohol on all fly-in, fly-out sites.
It found that sexual harassment within the state's fly-in, fly-out industry was generally accepted or overlooked, and there was a culture of cover-up. The report calls for tougher punishment against perpetrators and greater efforts to prevent them from working at other mine sites. It also recommends mandatory sexual harassment and assault training for all employees. Good on the mining sector, and specifically Rio Tinto, which, remember, last year made public its own report into what's happening on its mining sites. But it just doesn't make comfortable reading, and in 2022, to think this stuff goes on in the workplace is pretty astounding. There is something drastically wrong in the sector, and it needs to be addressed.
Yeah, you're right there. Sean, I was a bit surprised by this next story. Staff shortages are apparently hitting large and medium-sized enterprises more than small businesses.
That's right. The Australian Bureau of Statistics found 2/3 of large businesses and a little less than 2/3 of medium-sized enterprises are struggling to find suitable staff. For small businesses, that number's less than 30%. Mostly it's because applicants don't have the required skills, or in fact, there are no applicants for jobs. In particular demand are building trade workers, clerical workers, labourers, sales staff, and hospitality workers. Other in-demand jobs are engineering trades and ICT professionals.
Do you think the impact, though, would be bigger for small businesses? Because if they can't find one person and they're only a business with 4 people or so, that's a fairly significant impact on their ability to function.
Yeah, that's true. And I mean, I think a lot of small businesses are family run as well. And so there's plenty of help from family members at times. But you're right. If you've got 4 people and you lose one, that's 25% of your staff out the door.
Yeah, absolutely. All right. Now, Qantas, Sean, reliability issues have plagued the airline in May. 1 in 13 flights cancelled during the month.
It raises questions about the airline's COVID-19 cost cuts and whether the airline really has been able to fully recover. Domestic on-time performance statistics for May, published by the Bureau of Infrastructure and Transport Research Economics, shows Qantas cancelled almost 8% of scheduled flights during the month of May, up from a little over 5% in April, as travellers returned to the air as pandemic rules eased. An airline spokesman said these results were only marginally worse than Virgin Australia, which cancelled 5% of flights. Chief Executive of Qantas, Alan Joyce, previously has said that the airline was addressing operational issues to get back to where they were before the pandemic. clearly they've got a way to go there. Qantas is not the only carrier experiencing troubles, with airlines in Europe and the US reporting similar challenges. Qantas did improve slightly its on-time arrival performance. That was 62% of flights arrived on time in May compared to 59% in April. Virgin was at 66% and Regional Express at 76%.
Okay. Now, Sean, trade tensions with China seem, unfortunately, no closer to abating after Beijing yesterday defended its trade sanctions on $20 billion worth of Australian exports as beyond reproach.
In the strongest sign so far, Beijing has no appetite to back down and remove the sanctions. China's foreign ministry said the restrictions imposed on Australian wine, beef, barley, coal, seafood, cotton and other goods was in line with Chinese law and World Trade Organization rules. That's something that Australia disagrees with. The foreign ministry in China called the measures legitimate, lawful and beyond reproach. Prime Minister Anthony Albanese last month said that China should dump the tariffs on Australian exports if it was serious about mending relations with Canberra.
All right. Now, there is little evidence, Sean, I mentioned this one at the top of the show, little evidence that e-cigarettes help people quit smoking. This is according to the Health and Medical Research Agency. And in fact, they do damage.
Yes, not only do they not help you give up smoking, vapor is harmful. The advice provided by the National Health and Medical Research Council has been accepted by Chief Medical Officer Paul Kelly and his state and territory equivalents. People who vape can be exposed to numerous harmful chemicals along with nicotine. The research also found that some e-cigarette users often become users of tobacco, in effect becoming dual users of both products. So it has the exact opposite effect of what you want.
All right. Now, Sean, you mentioned earlier lithium stocks, and one company in particular is worth talking about, Lake Resources, which is a lithium miner. It was included in the S&P ASX 200 this week. Since then, its share price has nearly halved. Yeah,
look, it should have been a great week given the company was added to the top 200. That's important because it forces index funds to buy shares of those companies. But on Monday, ahead of trading, the company announced that Managing Director Stephen Promnitz was leaving the firm and stepping off the board. It appears he then proceeded to sell his entire share portfolio of 10.2 million shares. That's according to the Financial Review. Since then, Lake Resources has shed more than 50% of value in just 3 days. Quite incredible.
That is extraordinary. All in all, yesterday, though, it was a pretty rough day overall for lithium stocks.
Sure was. While Lake Resources fell 15%, other one-time market darlings are certainly feeling the wrath of investors who aren't so sure that lithium prices are going to stay as high as they are right now. Sayona Mining fell 12% yesterday and Liontown Resources was off 9%. Certainly investors don't like lithium at the moment.
Yeah, sounds like it. A couple of smaller stories for you, Sean. The New South Wales government plans to increase fines for illegal public sector strikes.
Yes, the plan is to introduce fines of up to $55,000 a day, 5 times the current levels. It would bring New South Wales in line with Queensland.
The latest global ranking of business schools says that Melbourne University is the number 1 school in Australia for MBAs.
Yes, Melbourne Uni came in at number 29 globally in the QS Executive MBA ranking. It's one of the more highly respected rankings. Then came Monash, University of New South Wales, RMIT in Melbourne, and Wollongong University.
And Sean, I don't think I've ever heard as many people discussing lettuces as there has been in the last couple of weeks. And it's all because of these extraordinary prices that people are being forced to pay for the humble lettuce. And it seems that the lettuce prices will not be coming back to more normal levels until August.
Supermarket Woolworths yesterday said it will be a couple of months before some fruit and veggie prices come back to normal. Not just lettuce, Michael, but also strawberries, blueberries, zucchinis and capsicums. There you go.
It's no big loss really with zucchinis.
Or capsicum for that matter. Not a fan.
But strawberries and blueberries and lettuces, they're kind of staples.
Yeah, absolutely.
All right, glad we're on the same page. All right, moving on to overseas news. Air New Zealand says it will relaunch 14 international routes in 16 days.
Yes, the national carrier of New Zealand is ramping up capacity post-COVID and will be at about 60% once those routes come online. Some of the country's most popular routes include flights to Honolulu, Houston and Tahiti. They've all been out of operation for about 2.5 years. Chief Executive Greg Foran said there's plenty of pent-up demand, especially from Australia Australia, and the carrier will double its service between the two countries from July.
The UK, Sean, is in the midst of major transport strikes with the London Underground closed and many intercity services not running.
Yes, the dispute is over pay job losses and working practices. It has really brought the country to a standstill. Only about 20% of normal train services operated overnight, and across many parts of the country, the network was completely closed. There's another strike set for Saturday. Funny thing, Michael, I was talking to a colleague who was UK-based, who was London-based, only a couple of days ago when the strike began, and he said because we're all used to working from home due to COVID, strikes themselves are much less disruptive now, which is kind of an interesting side effect of COVID.
Yeah, it certainly is, and really the first time in history that would be the case, isn't it? That suddenly the power behind a strike is kind of weakened a bit.
Not quite as, I think that's right.
Yeah. All right, Chinese President Xi Jinping has pledged to meet economic targets for the year, even as the government's zero-tolerance approach to combating COVID outbreaks and a weak housing market put the growth goal further out of reach.
He is certainly determined to hit growth targets, and increasingly that looks like it means a lot of government spending. In a keynote speech to a virtual BRICS business forum on Wednesday, President Xi said China will strengthen macro policy adjustment and adopt more effective measures to strive to meet the social and economic development targets for 2022 and minimise the impacts of COVID-19. Now, Beijing hasn't referred to its domestic growth target of around 5.5% for some time. In fact, not since April. Most China watchers don't think they'll be able to get there. Most China watchers reckons growth will be around 4%. It'll be interesting to see.
And one last one for you, Sean. Rupert Murdoch and his fourth wife, former supermodel Jerry Hall, have divorced.
Yes. What's this got to do with business? Not much. Two have been married since 2016. Can't say that we're not slightly voyeuristic here.
I know, it's one of those stories, that's actually a bit sad, isn't it? It kind of seemed like a little bit of one of those odd couple kind of things that might actually just work.
Yeah, well, any divorce is sad, so good luck to them both.
Yeah, absolutely. All right, now up next is the Fear and Greed Daily interview. We talked a bit about it earlier. Dr. Hugh Williams, co-founder and chief executive of CS in Schools.
He is a very passionate man, loves technology, and basically thinks kids should learn to love technology too. That's pretty much the interview in a snapshot.
Yeah, he is a tech guru. It is definitely worth listening to what he has to say. It is coming up next in the Fear and Greed playlist on your podcast platform or at fearandgreed.com.au. Thank you, Sean.
Thank you, Michael.
It's Friday, the 24th of June, 2022. Make sure you're following the podcast. Join us online on LinkedIn, Twitter, and Facebook. And why not have a go at listening to us as well through your smart speaker? All you need to do is say, play the Fear and Greed podcast, and it should start playing. I'm Michael Thompson, and that was Fear and Greed. Have a great day.